All right, just in time with a bunch of phonies and pretentious people as the draft draws ever closer in the QB league. Who better to talk to than a guy who made the transition from college athlete to the NFL as a quarterback, and who can break down the quarterbacks about to be picked off the board? Oh, you know what? The whole world of it. It's the host of Always College Football, Greg McElroy. What's happening, man? How are you?
Good to be back with you, Chick. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing well. Better for your company. What do you make of? I hate to start off with with a little vinegar here, but every year it drives me crazy. What do you make of people who are alleged draft experts who don't watch college football? Do you think you can really? Is there a needle that can be thread there that, like, I didn't watch any of them, but I've been grinding tape for a couple of weeks here, so now I'm up to speed on who's going to be good in the NFL.
Well, I think that's why there's so many misses. Not that us as college analysts would excel, because it's not really the same game. You can watch the tape and not understand the guy. So I think that so often when you're drafting a guy, look, everybody's going to put their best foot forward in the draft process, right? Like, if they don't, all right, run away as fast as you can. But are you really able to get to know a guy over the course of a 3.5, 4 month period? Or do you really need several years in being around the kid, having covered the kid, watching the kid mature, watching him go through the ups and the downs of playing at the college level? I think that's why there's a lot of misses, because people try to cram for the test. And sure, sometimes you prepare and get the answers right that you ultimately wanted to get right. But there's a reason why Mitch Trubisky was drafted second. Mahomes was drafted, 10th? And there's a reason for that. And every single one of us could have told you, hey, man, Deshaun Watson's pretty good player, And if you just watch Deshaun Watson and watch his productivity and watch how he moves and how he handles all these different aspects in the pocket and how he can get guys open, how he anticipates throws, every one of us could have told you he's going to be a pretty good pro. So I think that sometimes it's very obvious. Like Trevor Lawrence, everyone and their brother knew. The second he stepped out there as a true freshman, he's going to be a great college player and conversely a great NFL player too. So I think it just depends. Not that the college guys have all the answers. I'm sure there's several guys I loved coming out that would have busted, and guys that I didn't love so much that have been great. But there have been a bunch of examples in which our prognostications are probably pretty good relative to some of the dice rolls that we see at times in the NFL.
Where were you specifically on one guy? There was a lot of, I feel like it was about as 50-50 as it could get. Jalen Hurts. What did you say 3 years ago? Did you see this level coming from this guy?
I didn't love him coming out. Loved his intangibles, loved his makeup. Felt like he's the type that you'd have a difficult time betting against, just because of the way he responded to adversity in college. If you look at his first 2 years, really wasn't that great a player. Good freshman year. Sophomore year was a little hesitant to cut it loose, was scared to make a mistake. Tua Tagovailoa was a true freshman on that team, breathing down his neck. So he knew that if he made a mistake, then Tua might get inserted into the lineup and he might never get it back. So he was really kind of conscientious with the football, and it was difficult to get a gauge unless a guy was completely wide open. And then you go to the next year, he was able to go in as a backup to Tua, and he just got so much better because he was entering the game and they're up 4 touchdowns. So if you throw a pick, who cares? Like, let it rip. I mean, it didn't matter at that point. So mistakes weren't going to be as scrutinized when the game's already out of hand. And then fast forward to his time at Oklahoma, it was a very quarterback-friendly offense. Guys were wide open. CeeDee Lamb, for instance, was always wide open. Just throw it to him, and all that was going to work out. I was just a little concerned about the pinpoint accuracy that would be required in the NFL. Would he be able to make that transition? And he's clearly been able to do that. And one thing I wasn't sure of, he was a great, powerful runner in college. I didn't think that would translate, because are you really going to run guys over in the next level? Probably not. Are you going to be able to shimmy and make guys miss as often as he did in college? Probably not. I thought that would be a difficult part of his transition too. So I was actually on the fence that he'd be a great backup, but not an elite level starter. And clearly he's proven, all of his doubters wrong up to this point, and has now been rewarded with a remarkably lucrative contract.
Yeah, it's funny you say that about his running, because that's one aspect of a QB that you try and evaluate. As a, for instance, Josh Rosen to me, I thought, man, imperfect at UCLA, but not a perfect situation for the kid there. And, all the stuff about how smart he was. And he obviously had a pro level whip. But I thought, boy, he's going to be able to burn some guys in the NFL with his legs. And a couple of smart people told me, no, that advantage he has will go away at the pro level. He's not going to be fast enough. He's not big enough to run away from those guys. The evaluation is great because it does seem like, for the final 2 months of this stretch, combine and pro days and all of that, it's easy to get seduced by the specimen. Anthony Richardson, I'm of the mind largely that if the goal is to get the best or is to get the biggest upside, then Anthony Richardson is kind of the pick there. But then I go the other way, and I like gunslingers too, by the way. As a football fan, it's more fun to me, I think, to watch Elway, Favre, Roethlisberger, Josh Allen than it is to watch the surgeons, Brady, Peyton, Breeze, and so on. Ultimately, is it impossible? Like where you started 5 minutes ago with, we didn't know the kid. Like, is it overstated or just ultimately unknowable that how much tape the kid grinds is a factor in who's going to be good at the NFL? Or is it just or is it more about like, find me the best possible specimen and we'll make it work around him and we'll teach him how to learn pro level offense? If that's not too convoluted a question.
No. I know where you're going. I think the big thing with Anthony Richardson, like if you want raw horsepower, like he's your guy. I mean, that's simple as that. But how malleable is he? Right. I think that's a big question. I mean, if you look at from week to week, his performance against Utah, week 1, and then his second week, his performance against Kentucky, it was almost as if he was a completely different guy. Like, why is that? And help me understand why that is, because to me, it felt like it was all mental. It's like, man, I just lit the world up in week 1. Everyone's talking about me as like the next Vince Young. And I don't want to disappoint anybody. So I'm scared to make a mistake. And it just never came to be. And then you look at him a little bit later against Tennessee, against LSU. There were some good moments for Anthony Richardson. He's got great physical skill set, but we know that. I don't need to explain that to anybody that's paying attention. I mean, if you just watch him for 10 minutes, you know that there are rare traits that he can put on display. But I do think you can't just overpower the NFL. You referenced, gunslinger versus surgeon. I'm not sure you can just be one and not the other anymore. The best gunslingers are also surgeons. And that's why Mahomes is different. He's a good gunslinger, great physical skill set, but will pick you apart with what you do and line up in defensively.
Who are those guys? Because I'm fascinated by my own metaphors that I've created around quarterbacks. Gunslinger's old, surgeon is new. I thought that game manager was disrespectful. I think surgeon is a little more genuflecty. But then what do we call Mahomes, Rodgers, and I guess that's what Bryce Young is supposed to be, is that hybrid of the two sort of guys. Justin Herbert maybe fits into that category. It can beat you in various ways. But we need a word. I mean, there's Burrow, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's surgical. I mean, obviously, Josh Allen, when he was coming out, it was really more athletic, and it took him a little while to make the transition to become more surgical. I think that's still a bit of a work in progress. As good as he is, I do think that there's game management aspects of his game that are continuing to improve. So I think that look, everybody wants Mahomes. And if you can't get Mahomes, everybody wants Josh Allen. Well, if you can't get Josh Allen, everybody wants Burrow. Okay, fine, but it's also a little bit circumstantial. Burrow is surrounded by a remarkable supporting cast. If and when that supporting cast leaves because they become too expensive, then will he have the same efficiency? I don't know. I mean, he's never taken the field, even dating back to his college days. He took the field with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Now, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was his running back, a first-round pick, Kansas City Chiefs. Now he's taking the field with 2 All-Pros and Higgins, and obviously what Jamar Chase has done already in the NFL. I think the Bengals, you can make a case, have arguably the best set of weapons in the entire NFL. So I think it just depends.
And they're going to get one of those tight ends, one of the fancy pass catching tight ends in the first round. It seems like.
It seems like that. Yeah, for sure. But it's one of those where when you look at everything, I don't think you can be a one-trick pony anymore. I mean, you have to be able to create. You have to be mobile. You have to be willing to take what the defense gives you and be that game manager, understanding what the team needs at that specific point of the game, given down and distance to keep the offense moving. If you try to do too much, you'll get sacked. And next thing you know, behind the sticks and you're in trouble. So I think that you have to be a hybrid of all of the above nowadays to be a high-level quarterback. Rodgers has been that forever. Absolute gunslinger, but also a tactician with sneaky athleticism that I think is constantly underrated and constantly undervalued. The guy's really mobile and can run away from defenders and has at times in his career. So I think over the course of, of the evaluation process now, and you look at all the guys coming out that are going to get drafted in the first round, all of them have mobility. All of them have enough arm to make all the throws. All of them have been pretty accurate, with the exception of Levis and Richardson, who have streaky accuracy. So I think that there's a reason why all these guys are going as high as they are, because they showcase multiple traits that would allow them to sneak into the first round.
Yeah, it's the notion of trying to divine, though, back to where I started about 5 minutes ago here, trying to divine what's in the head and the work ethic. And the thing I keep here, I was in Pittsburgh talking with some of the Steelers people, and they rave about Kenny Pickett. Man, this kid just studies. And it does sound like that's the common thread with Brady and Peyton and guys who succeed who aren't necessarily the most gifted physical specimens. Where are you on Kenny Pickett going into year two because situation, obviously we're not talking about anybody in a vacuum here. In a good situation, they beefed up the offensive line there in Pittsburgh, some nice weapons there. Do you like Kenny Pickett's upside? Is there an upside, or is it just entirely about how much this kid can learn watching tape and making the quick decisions necessary to take advantage of what he sees pre-snap?
Yeah, I wasn't.
He's not a specimen, right? I mean,
no, he's not. I wasn't super high. I mean, he has plenty of arm, but I wouldn't say he's a freak show by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, Kenny Pickett was one of the guys that was not as high on. I didn't really like anybody in that class. I just thought the class overwhelmingly was okay, not anywhere near the upside of this current class and then next year's class as well, with Caleb Williams and Drake May and a few other guys that'll be coming out in the 24 draft. So that year's class, just not really in love with them. Saw Kenny Pickett at the Senior Bowl, was underwhelmed. Did like Sam Howell a little bit, but I think his ceiling is a little bit limited. I think he's got a chance though now to kind of take the step now with the Commanders to maybe become that QB1 for the foreseeable future. But, I'm not as high on Kenny Pickett as others. I love the guy. I haven't been around him. But what I've noticed, and if you really want to play quarterback at the highest possible level, you got to be crazy. And you do. You have to be crazy. Peyton Manning, crazy, chip on his shoulder. Tom Brady, crazy, chip on his shoulder. Drew Brees, crazy, chip on his shoulder. Like all these guys that go on to have ridiculous careers, not only are they very accurate, very smart, very decisive, study a ton of tape. Those things are prerequisite, man. If you don't study a lot of tape, you're just not going to be very good. Like there's only so many Kyler Murrays out there that don't watch a lot of tape, that aren't going to be grinders, that are just going to make plays on the fly. Like you have to be able to study tape. That's a prereq. There's not a single guy in the NFL that doesn't do it. I mean, Kyler, I think now has even matured to the point where he's watching tape and preparing because he knows that's the best way to progress. So I think that there's a lot of, if you have to just praise a guy for how much tape he watches, like, okay, I don't care. You better. It's your job. Self-preservation and watching tape and studying is your job. So to me, that doesn't make you special. What makes you special are the guys that are pissed that even after a touchdown, they're pissed that they missed that 2nd and 10. Yeah, hey, they went 8 for 9 on that drive with the touchdown and 72 yards. But they're pissed about the 2nd down 7 incompletion they threw out in the flat. Like those are the guys that I would bank on every day and twice on Sunday. So the guys that are a little bit crazy, the guys that are perfectionists, the guys that are never going to be satisfied, even if the result is what the result ultimately becomes in a touchdown or a win or a Super Bowl, those are the guys I want to bank on. Like the fact that Patrick Mahomes will still be playing against guys that were drafted in front of him and count to 10 on his hands, even though he's the highest paid player in the history of the NFL with the $450 million contract, and he's still pissed that he went 10th overall. Those are the guys that I want to buy. Those are the guys that I want to take. Josh Allen, who's pissed that he only had one scholarship offer coming out of high school, and that was to Wyoming. He's pissed about that still. It's like, hang on, dude, you're one of the highest paid players in the history of the NFL. I'll take that guy every day and twice on Sunday. Lamar Jackson's pissed that when he was going through the process that, hey, people thought I should change positions. Like he's pissed at the world about that and is trying to prove someone wrong. Even after he gets paid, he's going to continue to try to prove people wrong. Like those are the guys that I would bank on. And those would be the guys that I would, those would be the guys that I would.
I love it, but how would we know? How do we know until after the fact, right? We don't know.
Well, you can kind of tell the makeup a little bit. The fact that Peyton Manning walks into the owner's office or the GM's office said, if you don't take me, you're going to regret it every single week for the rest of your career. Like,
yeah, but
I got guys that are wired.
To play devil's Dameshek, though, you know who else did that? Josh Rosen. Oh, man, those 9 teams.
See, but if you ask the people that cover Josh Rosen, they would tell you that he was painfully immature. And you can listen to the press conference chatters different. You can tell, like, I could have told you that Josh Rosen was not going to work out. I think he's pure throwing the football, but he was very immature in his process of being the quarterback at UCLA. He just was. So, and that's part of, you got to lean into the college aspect of it as well. I mean, the guy had a hot tub in his dorm, and I'm not mad at that. Like, I'm not, I'm just saying, like, there are things that you can find out about guys. Talking a big talk in a press conference after the fact is fine, but I need to know what makes you tick prior to getting into the press conference after you've been disappointed. That's what I need to figure out. So that's what I would try to figure out as best as humanly possible. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to find out. And to be honest with you, look at all the guys that are coming out this year. There are a couple strong personalities, but you don't have that obvious, like, oh, that dude's an alpha dog when evaluating the quarterback spot this year. Like Bryce Young's a really nice kid, like really good dude, good family, great support system, has had a ton of success at the college level, has had to deal with some disappointment, having lost the national championship, but he won the Heisman. I mean, he's had to deal with a lot of positives. CJ Stroud, not a lot of negativity throughout his career, other than the 2 losses to Michigan. I mean, he'd been questioned in those games, came back against Georgia in maybe the biggest game of his career and played the best game of his career and almost ultimately won that game against the Bulldogs in Atlanta in the semifinal this past year. Levis had to transfer because he was beat out for the starting job by Sean Clifford. Gets a fresh start at Kentucky, experienced a ton of adversity this past year when his offensive line was leaking, the run game wasn't as good. So would like to get to the bottom of that. And then Richardson, just inconsistent performance throughout his career. He'd be a little bit of a concern for me because mentally shaky would be something that would make me give me a little bit of pause, a little bit of apprehension, because I don't like my quarterbacks to be a roller coaster. I need to know what I'm getting from their guy every single week. And if he is unflappable, the performance might not always be level, but you can tell by looking at a guy's eyes whether or not he has it or he doesn't have it on a given day. And there were a number of times last year they were talking about a guy that might go in the top 5 that looked like he didn't have it and looked like a deer in headlights. So that would concern me a little bit when evaluating him and he transitions to the next level.
Man, this is a great new drill at the combine. Greg McElroy's eye test. Like, you just walk up. Now it's time. Okay, the 40s have been run and the 3-cone times.
Get rid of the combine. The combine's worthless.
McElroy just walks up to every QB and looks him in the eyes for 10 straight seconds. And then he turns around and says, McElroy says it's Bryce Young this year. That would be a cool new feature. I don't know.
I would tell you this. We won't bat 1,000. I can promise you that. But I do think that there is a part of the evaluation process at that position specifically where it's just too much stock is put into the pro day, Too much stock is put into the combine. Nobody cares. Like if I'm going to draft a guy based on a performance in a pro day or a combine, like you might as well pack your tent as an organization. Like I want nothing to do with those two events in evaluating who my guy's going to be.
I completely agree. It seems crazy to me that you wouldn't evaluate a guy. Of course, you want to meet him and kibitz with him and get to know him as a human being some, but ultimately, doesn't it matter what he did on Saturdays for the last 3 years versus what he does? And the weirdest thing about pro days and the combine to me is, why don't they at least wear helmet and pads? You did this. Doesn't it impact how you throw the ball when you have a helmet on versus not?
I mean,
it does a little bit.
If it does, then you really don't need to get drafted. So I don't.
Maybe I'm applying. That's heavy on my arm. I can't throw it. That right. I'm applying Dameshek logic to.
I'll pass on those guys. Some of the guys I like in this year's class, though, I mean, outside of like the aforementioned top guys, because let's be real. I mean, they're all going to go in the top 4. Who cares? Like, I mean, it doesn't really matter where they end up. It's going to be situational. Like one of these 4 guys is going to go to in a great situation and everything's going to be great for him. One guy's going to go into a god-awful situation. They're going to have a terrible career. It's going to happen. I mean, just you roll the dice. That's the way it's going to go. But some guys down the list that I would roll the dice on that I think have that edge. Max Duggan, TCU. I'm not saying he's a starter. I'm just saying he'd be a guy I'd roll the dice on third day. Another guy that I would roll the dice on would be Jake Haener from Fresno State. I really like his game. Think he has the right mental makeup, the right moxie to be able to step into a situation and potentially surprise. So those would be a lot of people say Stetson Bennett. I think Stetson Bennett's immature. I think he's a good player. I think he had a great year last year, but he was in college for 7 years and didn't graduate. Like that to me, that to me feels immature. And I think that, and he had the public end talks earlier this year during the draft process. Look, everyone's entitled to do what they want to do, but he would be one that would be a day 3 guy that I'd be a little bit more weary of, even though I think he had a great season last year. I think he's a really good player, but I want to know, how are you from a maturity standpoint? And if I need you to become a pro or become a face of a multi-billion-dollar franchise, can you do it? And there's, I don't care if it's first 4 picks or 7th round pick, Mr. Irrelevant. Every single quarterback that I'm evaluating has to check the maturity box, because you're just not going to be able to play at a high level if you don't check that box.
We talked about it the last time you and I got together, that you were QB3 in the Tebow Sanchez experience with the New York Jets. I am of the mind, you mentioned Duggan. I love the idea of drafting a guy and letting him know day one, like, you're the backup. Like, I want you to be a professional backup QB in the NFL. Like, Jason Garrett was successful doing that. Chaz Batch in Pittsburgh never was under any illusion that he was going to supplant Big Ben. I like that kind of a guy and developing that guy long-term. How say you on that sort of approach? Because like you said, I don't think anybody's looking at Duggan and saying like, yep, he's the answer for us long-term as a franchise.
No, I mean, he's not going to be, but I mean, think about the guys that have been drafted in that situation, like Kirk Cousins, for as many detractors as he has. Right. The guy's had a heck of a career. I mean, so those are guys that can be difference makers from a franchise standpoint. Worst case scenario, I mean, if anything, you can get some draft equity out of it. I mean, think about what Kevin Kolb was, even though he ultimately fizzled, but there was some draft equity there, even though he was a down the line backup there for a little bit. Look what Brock Purdy did this past year. I mean, where would San Francisco have been if not for Brock Purdy's emergence? And if you look at just how many backup quarterbacks played in the 2022 NFL season, it is absurd. I mean, look at what Mike White's getting paid now. Look at what Heineke's getting paid. Like, these guys are making real money, and rightfully so, because the likelihood of them having to play, it seems like, is higher than ever, because more quarterbacks are mobile. More quarterbacks are doing RPO. They're taking bigger hits. They're missing games. It just seems to be happening more. Look what Gardner Minshew did. And if you look at it, there just feels like the backup quarterback position, there is a new premium on that spot. Not saying it's ever going to be game-changing, generational, maybe for some of it. I mean, $10 million a year is pretty good. I think Mike White's hovering in that if he hits all of his incentives and everything. It's not like it's going to be a $50 million guy, but that's a really important piece, especially if your quarterback, your starter, like Tua, has had a questionable injury history.
It's exactly what I'm thinking about. And it's weird because it's hard to figure out who is that guy, because Teddy B strikes me. It's like, well, that would be the optimal figure to fill the position I'm talking about. But of course, they flamed out when Teddy B went under center and Tua went out. Interesting. Teddy B's another guy who I think in the right situation, he went to the playoffs and all of that in his early years. I'm just thinking about this now is, I think it's overstated. The franchise QB is understated nominally, is overstated who fills that bill. Jared Goff with the Rams, they drafted him first overall, so they paid him out. He almost won an MVP, took him to a Super Bowl. They paid him out and realized none of that adds up to him actually being the guy. Interesting act two, that now in Detroit, they probably are better served to stick with him than try and dip into the draft in 2023 to replace him. But this is an evaluator I'm coming up with as we speak. What QBs out there? Because I think most NFL starting QBs can win a Super Bowl if you put them in the right spot. There are probably 5 or 10 QBs who are going to start in 2023 who probably have no chance of winning the Super Bowl with their team, and the teams understand that. What QBs out there can win multiple Super Bowls? Because I think if you win 2, now it's like there's no fluke at all to that, right? Is that fair to say that, okay, a guy can, Flacco his way, or Brad Johnson his way, or Trent Dilfer, and, all the examples that we can summon.
Matt Stafford. I mean, there's a bunch of them.
Is Stafford that guy? I
think Staff's obviously a really good player. But I mean, right place, right time. I mean, that's everything though, right? I mean, Mark Sanchez almost got to 2 Super Bowls. So, I mean, there's a million examples of guys that were close, or, almost surging through. I mean, Tannehill, Blake Bortles made a deep run with Jacksonville. I mean, it's just, there's examples.
But that never would have happened again, though, right? Like Blake Bortles never would have done that again. And that's I guess what I'm getting at. Like, all right, things break just so, and everything's magical for 1 6-week stretch, and all of a sudden the Lombardi is a possibility for you. But it's not sustainable if that guy is a ham and egger. You get my point, right? Or they're like, what? How many are there who are that guy? I don't care what's around him. That guy could win the Super Bowl because of who he is, and no matter. I mean, there's a floor to it that obviously is complete garbage, but for the most part, how many guys are there, and who are they?
Let's go through it. AFC East. All right, you got Josh Allen. I think he can obviously win a Super Bowl. I don't think I need to.
I don't know, man. That. I don't know. Like he had to do it all last year, and he couldn't do it.
Well, they'll get there though. I think the run game will get better this year. Or at least I'm hopeful that it will. Aaron Rodgers, assuming he's a Jet. I think you can win a Super Bowl with Tua. I really do. You just got to stay healthy, which
I agree with that. I think they would have. I really think they would have won the division and made some real hay last January if Tua had been right. I rode that all year long, and I'm gonna double down on it again this year. I'm a believer.
I mean, I think he's got a good feel. I think he doesn't have a huge arm. There's no denying that, but very accurate, anticipates throw. So I'm at 3 right now in one division. AFC North, we know Burrow can. I think Lamar Jackson can.
Lamar Jackson can win 2 Super Bowls if he gets this $200 million guaranteed deal, and then consumes a much bigger chunk of the cap.
Well, I mean, obviously that's a hindrance, but it's not like he's taken the field with outside of Mark Andrews. Like I mean, no disrespect to his supporting cast. It's not like he's got high priced talent at wide receiver right now.
Well, now he does with $18 million OBJ.
Right. OBJ, that's fair point. If he hits all his incentives, yes, that's right. It does. I mean, I think it's 10 off the top, right? I don't recall exactly what the structure is. But yeah, I would say that we're at 5 right now. I'm excluding Deshaun Watson from that group right now. I'm cautiously optimistic he'll get back to playing as well as he did a few years back. But I still, at this point, haven't seen it in Cleveland, so it's tough for me to totally hop on that bandwagon. I think.
Do you want to say the other number 8 in the division? You can. If you
I'm
want
not
to.
going to. No,
but you see the colors behind me, right?
I'm going to respectfully resist the urge to put second-year pro Kenny Pickett.
I hope you're listening, Ken Pickett. This is I hope you're crazy enough to hear what McElroy is saying and let
Hey,
it burn
it's not a knock. It's
underneath
just
me.
I got to see more. I mean,
Okay.
I got to see more. It's simple as that. I think Trevor Lawrence can definitely do it. Nobody else in the AFC South I would feel confident in. And I think you got two out west. Kansas City, obviously, and the Chargers. I'm a big fan of Herbert. I think Herbert's great. TVD on the Raiders, not willing to go there with
Cupboard
Jimmy
much
G.
bearer on the NFC side, though, right? I
Yeah.
mean, like Dak at this point, reasonable that he would win too.
Answer me this. Can Russ Wilson get back? We're still in the AFC for a second. Before we
Okay,
move on to
sorry.
the NFC.
Okay.
Russ has been to one, almost won two. So, or has won, almost won two. So, I mean, I still think Russ can play high level football. I just think there was clearly a disconnect last year organizationally, but I'm not willing to totally dismiss him as getting back to playing high level football down the road, even though I think it's unlikely. So we're at what,
He
7?
might in a vacuum. He might in a vacuum, and I'm kind of with you. Although, and I'll defer to you, obviously, and this goes beyond the McElroy eye-to-eye test and more you putting your eyes on his physical gifts. I was hearing from people who know what they're talking about, who are saying like, boy, Russ just looks cooked. Like he just, it looks like the high end speed and the whip and all that. You just think it was purely the connection he had with the head coach.
Oh, I mean, there was a disconnect and a physical disconnect too. He was not the same guy.
So how do you get that back at 34, whatever he is now?
I don't know. We've seen guys make late career surges in the past. I think it's unlikely. If you were to tell me right now, do you believe that Russ is going to play, all pro caliber football again? I would bet against that.
No, I mean, I know it's, I guess, semi-lazy kind of logic, but I do think that the vast majority, the sweet spot is the high-end QB on his rookie deal. That's when guys are going to win their title. So I get skeptical once a guy gets to about year 7 or 8 and that contract is fully mature and he's taken up 18-20% of the overall cap and how good the roster around him can be.
Well, look at Mahomes, though. I mean, Mahomes just proved that
he's Patrick Mahomes, though, right?
But I'm saying, like, if you are good enough, you can elevate even beyond, take up 20% of your team's cap. Fine. You can elevate everyone else beyond where they currently are. Hey, you lose Tyreek Hill, no problem. You lose this guy, no problem. We'll bring in Juju Smith-Schuster on a 1 year and let's see how he goes, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, but Kansas City is also going to be a destination for guys that are wanting to get back in the good graces in the eyes of the league. Like Juju Smith-Schuster goes there, takes a pay cut, 1 year deal, prove it deal. He gets paid now. So it's not, out of the realm of possibility that there are other places where that could become a destination as well. Philly, going to be interesting to see what happens with them, but I believe in Jalen Hurts based on what I've seen right now. I mean, we'll see. I mean, can you afford AJ Brown? Can you afford Devontae Smith, who's going to get paid here very soon? Like, can you afford all these other pieces? I don't know. I feel pretty confident though that Jalen Hurts is going to be, have Philly right back in the mix again next year. Dak, not as convinced right now with. I mean, anyone else in the NFC East you feel great about? I mean,
nope.
I know he just got paid. So back to your logic about whether or not it can actually be done with a quarterback that's not on their rookie deal, it remains to be seen.
I mean, I like Dimes. I could see things going just right for Dimes and then breaking through magical year. I just find it hard to imagine. Like, they won the Super Bowl. They're going to do it. I like him too. I think he's, it hit my ear as loco when they drafted him when they did. Obviously proven right with all of that. This is
he might just be scratching the surface though. Like last
Maybe.
year was such a big developmental year for him. I mean, there's a possibility that the light now that he's gotten paid, the pressure's off. I know you're going to think, well, now he's gotten paid, the pressure goes up. No, like pressure's off now for him. Like, I don't have to prove it anymore. I'm the guy. And I think that we might see a different guy moving forward because, hey man, I was worried about that deal. I was worried about my contract situation. Now I don't have to worry about it anymore. I'm in good shape. Like, I'm going to be wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. Let's just go play now. So I don't feel great about anybody in the NFC North right now winning multiple Super Bowls where they're at. So NFC South, obviously with multiple teams in the quarterback market, I don't feel great about that. And then NFC West, I don't know if you can win multiple Super Bowls with Brock Purdy as your quarterback at San Fran.
I do. You can't.
You don't think you can.
On. Brock Purdy's going to win a couple of Super Bowls. There's
No, I'm just saying, I think there's one team right now in the NFC where I'd say, yes, for sure, they can win multiple Super Bowls with their quarterback. And that's the Philadelphia Eagles. It's the only one right now. And that's even saying with a little bit of an uncertainty, knowing how things might change when the supporting cast isn't as good around Jalen Hurts as it's likely to be here for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it's funny when you start talking about the Giants, and producer Eddie Spaghetti there behind the glass loves this kind of talk. I do think it matters slightly. Let's not get crazy about it in mid-April, but a third place schedule is advantageous for that team. They get into the playoffs, they're feeling good about themselves, and yet they still have a relatively favorable set of 17 games compared with the teams above them. I mean, the Eagles are going to have tougher tests along the way than the Gents are in 23. Okay.
But a third place schedule. I mean, you still got the Rams. Obviously not bad. Saints, Packers. I mean, it's not like you're playing. I mean, the middle tier of the NFC is the margins are pretty slim. I mean, the Rams could bounce back. They're 2 years removed from a Super Bowl run. Now, I think they're totally in rebuild mode now, but still, I mean, it's not out of the question they bounce back from a 5-12 or whatever it was.
Man, that NFC, let's await the draft and see if it fixes itself up, because it does feel like the AFC. We talk about Russell Wilson's chances of bouncing back. Yeah, maybe in a vacuum, but not in that conference. How far is Sean Payton going to fix them up to be competitive against Mahomes and that Chargers roster? And we're just talking about within the division there.
Right.
Okay, here now let's shift wildly away from pro football here. And are you a hockey guy at all? I imagine you are, as a Bama guy.
Yeah, naturally. Hockey, for those Alabama fans that are listening, is a game played on ice. With sticks and pucks. So
far, so actually, good. You do know your stuff.
My dad worked for the LA Kings early in the 90s. He got there in 91. So we experienced a pretty special run, with Kelly Rudy and Robitaille and this young kid from Canada named Gretzky. Yari Curry. I mean, we had a sweet roster. Rob Blake, Warren Reichel. So I remember the 90s Kings. Those were that was the team of my childhood. And then Dad eventually moved to the Dallas Stars, where we had Madonna and Belfour and all those guys that were amazing. Yari Lettman.
Oh man. Chaz Huddy back with the Kings. Yeah. That's my wheelhouse of stuff. What the one of the great missed opportunities, like I would have loved to have seen Randall Cunningham's 15-1 Vikes play the defending champion Elway Terrell Davis Broncos. I think one of the biggest misses in sports possible matchups of my lifetime was that we didn't see Gretzky's Kings versus Lemieux's Penguins in 93. Back-to-back championships with the Pens, Gretzky and all the weight that carried. Man, that would have been great. Instead,
the problem is we had to play the Montreal Canadiens, and they went in and measured. Well, I'm convinced of this.
McElroy really knows his stuff.
They went in and said that Marty McSorley had an illegal stick because they snuck into our locker room, and we're getting ready to go up 2-0 and come back to LA, where the Great Western Forum's rocking and John Candy's sitting rinkside. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, it's not that it's too soon, but it is a little too soon to be bringing up the 93 Stanley Cup Finals. It was a difficult time for all of us.
Don't start with me. Let me tell you something. This was before your involvement with the LA Kings, but 1989, Gretzky winning that MVP award over Lemieux, who was 30 points or more ahead of him. But Gretzky moved to LA and made Kurt Russell like hockey. So somehow that required him to get the MVP award. That's the most fraudulent of all MVP awards in any sport of my lifetime. But the next question then, a Dallas Stars guy, Brett Hall's goal, was his foot in the crease, yes or no?
It was, but who cares? It's revisionist history. If you try to say it wasn't, it doesn't matter. Like, what are you going to do? Say that Dominik Hasek would have stopped it if his foot was 6 inches wider? Like, are you trying to suggest that? By the way, I really liked that Buffalo Sabres team. So it was like one of those where I believe like Michael Pekka was on that team and a few other, I really respected that group. So and I just love Buffalo sports. I don't know why. I just have always thought it's great. So I just, if we were going to beat a team, I didn't want it to be them. But ultimately, hey, my dad had never won a championship in his life. I mean, the guy played college football at the University of Hawaii, for crying out loud. So I was happy for him to finally get a shot to win a Stanley Cup ring, and he finally did there in '99. So no, I mean, yeah, he was in the crease, but who cares? I
root
guess.
for the I'm with you. I root for the good people of Buffalo myself. It's sort of like if you're watching the Sacramento Kings games. I
Right.
root for them. They don't have 3 or 4 teams to focus in on. So yes, I would like for but they deserved it for those terrible uniforms.
Well, I'll say this, like, if I, and this is going to sound crazy, but like, if we could have just flipped the following year, we lost as a Dallas Stars fan to the New Jersey Devils. So we lost to the Devils the following year. If we could have just beaten the Devils and lost to the Sabres, I would have been perfectly okay with it. But losing to Martin Brodeur and the Devils in 2000 almost erased any good feelings that we had from the 99 Stanley Cup win. It was that painful. It really was.
No one likes the Devils. Not even
They're
their
the
fans
worst.
at the time liked them.
No, they're the worst.
But the Sabres had, I mean, again, philosophically, the worst uniform, among the worst uniform. They're royal blue and gold, really handsome get-ups. And then one day they decide, like, yeah, now we're red, silver, and black. What the hell? Outrageous, right?
Well, I mean, the Kings, in fairness, as someone that has at times, obviously, like, I support the team that pays my dad, but the last NHL team that paid my dad was the Dallas Stars, so I remain a Dallas Stars fan. The Kings, they were purple and gold, and then they decided they wanted to be silver or gray and black. So, I mean, as someone that at one point rooted for a team that changed colors, I can't be that critical. So I'm just going to avoid throwing stones in glass houses.
It's cool that Bama never messes with their uniforms. Once in a blue moon, they go with the white hat. But that's a callback to days gone by.
They haven't done it in like 30 years though. So it's maybe longer. I think it's been since the 80s since they wore the white top.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, was that Mike Shula who pulled those out?
It might have been him when he was the quarterback in like 85. So it's been a while.
Okay,
you can do a lot of things in Alabama. You cannot mess with the uniforms. Like, they will not let you. You will have a revolt in Tuscaloosa if they start messing with the uniforms.
Listen, I'm okay with almost every franchise. I think it's cool that the Yankees don't mess with it. If
you don't like the Boston Red Sox like city uniforms that they wear where they're like blue and yellow, I'm like, what? Who is this? It's awful.
It's a real shame. Yeah, it's a real shame when that happens. And the number one of all time, just now that we're on the subject of just changing colors, is the Washington Capitals. You understand? They play in our nation's capital, right? They're red, white, and blue, Old Glory. Red, white, and blue uniform. Then one day they're turquoise, black, and gold. What in hell? I mean, you can't do those.
You can't wear red, white, and blue, though, when you're in the same division as the New York Rangers. So I actually don't have any issues with it because the New York Rangers take priority over the Washington Capitals. In my eyes, original 16. Like, you can't tell me that the Rangers aren't more important to the NHL than the Washington Capitals. I don't care what Ovi's done and everything else.
It's been great. No, listen, all of the hockey world focuses in on their one Stanley Cup in 82 years. Listen, you've sent Eddie Spaghetti over the moon here. He's a Rangers diehard. He's a Danny Dimes diehard. So you're speaking his language at least there. You like that talk, Spaghetti? Rags over Caps all time?
I've been enjoying this conversation quite a lot. So, yeah, pretty good.
Okay, let's wrap it up with this. Now, you're married to, as I did a little bit of research, I hope this isn't creepy to mention, but you're married to Meredith Grey. And so there's some weird naming stuff that could be confusing to people. It's not the fictional character, the doctor in Seattle. It's a different Meredith Grey altogether. But sometimes names can get confusing. And that brings me to a game we haven't played in a little while, but you might be the perfect person to jump in here, a football guy, but a hockey enthusiast. You may have noticed the NHL is the most global of all our sports, and some of the names are exotic enough that you might confuse them with prescription drugs. And that's why we play a game sometimes called NHL Player Prescription Drug. Would you like to play today?
Well, the only concern I have is like my knowledge of the modern day hockey is not as good as it is from like the 90s, 2000s, and early 2010s. So I feel like I'll kill all credibility by absolutely butchering some of these, but why not? Let's roll the dice.
Oh, I mean, listen, Uwe Krupp. That's better than anybody I'm going to throw out there, but Uwe Krupp, pretty good name right there to start us off. Okay, here we go. All you have to do, I'm going to give you a name. You tell me if it's a prescription drug or if it's a hockey player. Here we go. Wegovy. Now I'll give you a little bit of I'll give you just like to color it in to give you a little information. Wegovy. Is it a prescription drug for weight loss or the rugged defenseman of the Dallas Stars? Wegovy. Rasmus Wegovy, rugged defenseman.
I'm going to say prescription drug.
You're correct. It's a weight.
It was
loss
way
drug,
too.
Wegovy.
You're way too specific on the. And if you go Dallas Stars, I do know the Dallas Stars roster, and I don't know of a Govey, so I felt pretty good about that one.
All right. Here we go. Now, here we go. Vanacek. Is that a prescription drug that treats depression or the number one goalie for the aforementioned New Jersey Devils?
That would be Vanacek is a goalie. And he is, I thought he was with the Capitals, but I guess maybe he's on a new team. I don't recall.
Vitek Vanacek. Yes, he's playing the Spaghetti's Rags later on this week. So there you go. All right,
Did he play for the Caps at one point though?
Vanacek wore the red,
year.
white, and blue.
Greg's right. 2021, he did play for the Capitals.
I was gonna say, all right, so maybe I haven't quite caught up to this year's playoffs yet. Like I only watched playoffs hardcore. And I was like, hang on a second. I could have sworn he was not on the Devils. That's what threw me off for a second.
I'm not going to be able to watch the playoffs for the first round, not because I'm intellectually making that decision. I just know that my gut can't handle it with my Penguins out for the first time in 17 years. Same rule applies to all sports. Like when my team goes out in painful fashion, I have to take, a fortnight or so away for me. And then I'll get back into it.
I'm fine with that. As a Dodger fan, I've refused to watch any baseball beyond when they get eliminated every year. So I understand where you're at.
Right. I mean, there's got to be, you've got to be a person of honor at some point. All right, here we go. Cabuneva. Is it a prescription drug that treats HIV, or is it Henrik Cabuneva, the young Bruins winger who scored 38 goals this season?
I'm going to go prescription drug.
You're very good at this game.
You can't, you're too specific with your, I was like, hey, if he scored 38 goals, I would know him. And I don't know that name.
Puljujärvi. Is it a prescription for plaque psoriasis or the sizable winger of the Carolina Hurricanes?
I'm going to say
Puljujärvi.
I'm going to say hockey player.
Yesy Puljujärvi dealt away from the Oilers. You're right.
I was gonna say I watched. Hang on a second. I'm sitting there thinking. I'm like, they played the outdoor hockey game. You said Carolina. I'm like, hang on, that name feels familiar. So only because you said Carolina was able to connect the dots to the outdoor game that they played a few weeks back in Raleigh. So I was able to. That was a prayer. I will admit that was a bit of a prayer.
You're doing very well. I'm very happy for you.
I'm just glad I can miss the rest, and I feel like I've already done okay.
One or two more, and then we'll let you take leave of this nonsense. Yanni Gourde. Is that a prescription for restless leg syndrome or the checking line center of the Seattle Kraken? Yanni Gourde.
I'm gonna go restless leg syndrome.
We got him finally. He's a hockey player. Won some cups with the Lightning. Yeah, now trying to make a go of things up in Seattle with those Kraken.
I have not watched the Kraken, so I would never have gotten that one. I apologize to all the wonderful people of Seattle.
Oh, as a uniform enthusiast, you're missing out. Their get-ups are, if nothing else, worth the price of admission just to look at them. Well, you know what? I'm not gonna gild the lily. I got you on one. That's enough. You went 4-1 there. That's a winning rate by any standard. So we'll let you go on that one.
It's harder than you realize, though. If not for the hints, I would have struggled.
Wait till we play NBA player tech stock. That's another one. But that's for another day. We'll hold that one. Appreciate all the insights on the upcoming draft, what you look for at a QB, all the rest of it, dynamite stuff. Always college football. And when you stick to college football, it gives you some insights on who's going to be good at the next level. So make sure you're checking that out. And great times. Really appreciate you joining us today, man.
Thanks, Shaq. Appreciate you, bud.
There he goes. Greg McElroy, dynamite appearance there, especially for Eddie Spaghetti.